Are you a chiropractor with a struggling practice, having a hard time finding and keeping patients? Is your staff falling short of expectations? I'm Dr. Scott Sawyer, and DC Trainings has the answers that you need. So tune in now and find out how. Hello, everybody. Welcome to DC Trainings. I'm Dr. Scott Sawyer, and I want to, first of all, thank you for taking the time out today to get another chapter in your practice evolution and streamlining your practice. We're working our way through module 1, which is the team development module. And as we work through it, we're going just week by week with each of the steps that you need to build a successful team. That's why it's called team development. Our topic today is a very special one because it's one of the most common questions I get from our DC Trainings members is this specific question. And I'm kind of building up to it because it's a big topic. And as we go through these sections, I've intentionally led up to this specific topic with some prerequisites, if you will, in terms of hiring the right key players for your CA team, right? We talked about attracting applicants. We talked about the application meeting and the initial interviews. And then we talked about the final interviews and really dialed that in so that you could place your team and have the correct people on your team. And then we talked about job duties, right? And what everybody's going to be doing. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. We talked about the training schedule, which is what everybody's going to be doing and what they're going to be trained on. So my hope is that you've been implementing these steps as we go and filling in those needed gaps within your practice so that your whole system and your procedures in the office can run smoothly. And I want to just share an example of this because I'm, as I'll explain more, I'm out of town this week. I'm actually skiing with my family, and but I'm while I was gone, I have my associate doctor who's working with me in the office, and she sent me a note last night saying, I actually have two associates, one man, one woman, but the female associate sent me a note last night saying it was amazing how flawless the systems work in the office so that the doctors can just focus on taking care of patients. Now, I took that as a great compliment because that's essentially what we're aiming for here, is to have this flawless system that automates your practice so that it runs on autopilot. And in some cases, whether you're there or not, right? If I know that for all of us, we can work really hard, but we also need to play hard too. We need to have time outside of our practice to recharge, regroup, and unplug, and then we can come back in full tilt and really have that high energy that the practice requires. So with that, let's get into our topic today. I'm going to jump over to our PowerPoint and just share this with you. There we go. Actually, I have to do one more thing. My apologies. All right. I'm using one screen today, so that's why I have to bounce around just a little bit to get this to show. Okay. There we go. All right. So let's jump in to our process here. And I just want to kind of point out too, it is a process, right? It's a simple process. We're in week 6 already of module 1. So week 8 is coming right around the corner and we'll complete this module. But in this section, hiring a DC, I want you to have the freedom, as I just described, to be able to take some time off, take some time away from your practice. Or in the case where you're still in a growing phase, to have your practice automated in a way that you can serve literally twice as many patients and not have to work twice as hard. So that's the goal that we're striving for. So let's go through these slides and show you, oops, there we go, how this works. As a reminder, our next module will start March 9th. We won't have a live seminar for that one. We'll actually just jump right into it with our weekly webinars. But as we go through this process of placing your team in the right position, what's important that comes out of this is that you have your team structured in a way, because when we get to the next module, which is the new patient module, I want to make sure that the new patients coming into your practice have a great first impression. They're greeted with professionalism and a seamless system whereby they become educated and understanding of subluxations and the benefits of chiropractic care on a lifetime basis, right? So that'll be building up, we're building up through this module, leading to being able to make that great first impression with all of our new patients. So let's kind of take an overview of this. The first thing is on our materials, which I'll come back to in a minute, we have an outline for you to follow that's called hiring a DC. And this is a way of having a list of potential chiropractors to come and join your team to serve the patients with you. There's a couple different ways we can structure it, but again, you can see why this is so valuable when we're talking about having that doctor that you're going to hire come into a practice where everybody knows what they're doing. And that's such a great place to come into because, as you can imagine, many doctors, even in their own practices, are experiencing quite a bit of chaos or confusion or disorganization. But to come into a practice where everything's organized seamlessly and the doctor can just focus on what it is that they're being asked to do, which primarily obviously is take care of patients, it's such a stress reliever. It's such a big way to remove that burden of trying to run all these balls in the air at the same time or juggle all the balls in the air. So take a look at that outline. We'll talk about that more in just a minute. So why hire a chiropractor? Why hire a doctor of chiropractic to join your team? There's lots of reasons, but we're going to start with some basics, right? As I mentioned, care for more patients, right? If you have two doctors adjusting patients, I guess that's three, right? With my fingers, two doctors adjusting patients. Well, literally, that's twice as many patients as you can take care of. So that's a fantastic way to expand your service potential. The other one is increased revenue. And obviously, if you're taking care of twice as many patients, you can have twice the income, right? So another example of this that I want to share is for the solo doctor practice. Let's suppose you take a vacation, right? When you take a vacation, that means you don't have an associate doctor, then your patients are going to go without care, which is tragic in of itself, right? We can't have our patients not receive the care that's so vitally important to them. So when you have an associate, when you leave the practice, there's somebody there to take care of your patients. And as it says on the screen, by having that continuation of care, the continuity of care for all of your patients, you're going to be collecting more, you're going to have more money coming into the practice, you can serve more patients, and you can share the workload. And I'll give you examples of this as we go through in just a minute, but sharing the workload is huge, right? It allows the PDC, the primary doctor of chiropractic, to really focus on specific aspects of the practice that they wouldn't have time for when they're trying to run those other aspects of the practice. So it really spreads things out so that there's a sharing of the responsibilities. And as I mentioned, dependable backups. I started to tell that story and then I thought, I'm going to wait for this last bullet, because if you go on vacation and your patients aren't receiving the care that they need, which means that you're not receiving income because you weren't providing any services. So that vacation technically costs you at least twice as much as it would have, because you have to pay, you're going to lose the income that you would have made by providing care for your patients, and you have to pay for the vacation at the same time. So you want to have that dependable backup in place, ready to go, and that way your practice doesn't shut down when you're gone. So those are just some examples of why you should consider having another doctor on your team to take care of patients with you. Now, there's a couple ways we can structure this, and I want to go through each of these. The first way is an employee DC. This is somebody who's basically on a W-2 type of format, or they're taking care of your patients, doctors. You are the PDC, they're taking care of your patients. The second is an associate doctor, where that associate doctor is taking care of their own patients. Maybe they're sharing space with you, maybe they're renting space or sharing space, but they have their own patients to which they are the primary care provider, right? So those two are the different statuses. And as I'll show you, there's details under each one of them, but it's important to consider what you're seeking as you go into this hiring process for bringing on an associate or hiring another doctor. You want to know what it is that you're looking for in terms of exactly the role that they're going to fill when they are hired. So we want to make sure that that's in place. So in the instance of an employee DC, all the patients belong to the PDC. And I'll just use myself as an example because I have my own practice. I see the patients. My associate doctor adjusts them also, but when asked, whose patients are these in the practice, they're going to point the fingers at me. One phrase, and I want you to write this down if you're taking care of notes, or if you're taking notes, is that when your associate doctor in this capacity as an employee DC is taking care of those patients, and the patient says, I want you to do this other adjustment for me that I like, that I had years ago, or that adjustment was a little too painful. I want you to do it differently. The phrase I want you to write down is from your employee DC is this: I have adopted so-and-so's technique. So that's the adjustment I need to provide for you because Dr. So-and-so determined that's going to get you the best results. So, for example, Dr. Knich has an associate, and the associate doctor is being asked by a patient to use a technique or do an adjustment entirely different than what Dr. Knich has designated is going to be the best care for that patient. The response would be, I'm so glad you asked. I'm happy to take care of you, but I want to let you know I have adopted Dr. Knich's technique, and so I'm going to stick to what he said is best for you. But I will be sure to make a note of this, and I'll meet with him and make sure that then we're on the same page. If he wants me to change it, great, I'll change it, and it'll be based on your feedback, of course. But I just don't want to change anything before I clear it with him because this is the technique that I've adopted, and that's the technique that he's determined to be the best fit for you as a patient. Okay, so just be sure that that relationship maintains that hierarchy, and that way you won't have patients saying, "Well, I want to go to this doctor as opposed to that doctor. This doctor's adjustments are more comfortable, so I don't want to go to the other doctor." We don't want to have that preferential request coming in from our patients. So let's keep going. The benefit of having an employee DC is to have complete coverage for the practice, right? So in the instance where I leave the practice, and again, I'll just use my own practice as an example. I want to take a vacation. Actually, I'll continue on with Dr. Knich. Welcome to the call, Dr. John. You're a great example because you're good. I mean, I know you work hard and you take great care of your patients, but you also make time for vacations and you make time to have time away from the practice with your family. And during those times, your patients actually continue to be adjusted and receive the benefit of chiropractic care. So having that complete coverage for the practice is another really important aspect to consider when you're bringing on an employee DC. Let's keep going because there's another side of it, and that's the drawbacks, right? The drawback is, in terms of having that continuous backup, is that you need to have a full schedule of duties, of responsibilities for that person. Because if they're just waiting around for the time when you're going to be gone and then they step in, that's not a full-time job. That's not a full-time schedule. So we want to make sure that there's certain things that they can be doing that bridge the gap between when they're covering for you and when they're adjusting your patients, doctors, right, as the PDC, and when you're adjusting your patients, what else are they doing? And I've given you some really good examples of this so that you can keep their schedule full and have their role in the practice clearly delineated and measured so that their contributions are significant and you know what they're bringing to the table, and they're not just sitting in the back twiddling their thumbs waiting for something to do, right? So we want to make sure that there's a full schedule of duties ready and waiting. Okay, let's shift gears, right? That was the employee DC. For an associate DC, it's a different circumstance. So on the associate DC side, they have their own patients. So they're actually, their own patients is who they're taking care of. So they're seeing those patients, they're determining what type of adjustments those patients need, they're creating care plans for those patients, they're determining the financial arrangements for those patients. They're overseeing all of the care. They are not adopting your technique as the PDC when they're taking care of their own patients. That's completely a different arrangement. And now you can see why I said it's so important when you're hiring an associate or another chiropractor to know which role they're going to be filling. Okay. So they maintain their own patients. They set the whole thing up and they maintain them. They take care of them how they choose. The benefits are that increases your revenue, right? That associate DC is either going to be paying a percentage of their collections to the practice as a contribution to the overhead to keep the lights on and the CAs paid. So that's one of the benefits. There's increased income coming into the practice through that either percentage. And it could also be in addition to or instead of a percentage of their collections, it could be that they're paying rent, just like a flat rent, to rent space in the office and see their own patients out of that space. So there's increased revenue in those two ways, which it could be one or the other, or it could be a combination of the two. It could be that they're paying a flat base rent to have space in the office to see their own patients. And at the same time, they're being paid as an associate doctor or a relief doctor, if you will, when you, the PDC, are on vacation, right? And that's why the next benefit it says is that there's dependable backup for the PDC. Now, I'll just use some really random numbers. These are not accurate numbers, but just for simple math, let's say that they're paying $1,000 a month to rent space in your office. And in addition to that, they're gonna cover you for 10 days a year as a relief doctor to see your patients while you're on vacation. Just easy numbers to keep the math simple. So $1,000 a month is coming into the practice in rent. 10 days a year, let's say that you're paying $500 a day. I don't know what the rate would be, but I'm just, again, using simple math. So $500 a day, and that times 10 days, that's $5,000 a year. And then at the same time, they're paying you $12,000 a year. So $1,000 a month in income over a year is $12,000. So they're paying $12,000 to the practice in income. You're offsetting that $5,000 back to them to pay them for the relief work that they're doing when you're on vacation. So the net gain for you is going to be the 12 minus the 5, or 7,000 for the year. Now, what's really great about that is that's very attractive to an associate to say, okay, I'm going to be paying rent, but my rent that I would be paying just got dramatically smaller. I know I have to work on those days when I'm covering the other doctor's practice, but on the surface, my rent is significantly reduced because I'm covering the practice on those days, and it's reflected in the price that I'm paying. So there's a real win-win here that comes about when you set it up this way. So those are the benefits there: the increased revenue and dependable backup, and lowered rent for the associate. And so now let's look at some of the drawbacks, right? The drawbacks on the associate doctor are because they're running their own practice, because they're seeing their own patients, because they're setting up their own care plans for those patients. They may get the idea, or they may figure, I could do this better on my own and really not even have to pay as much rent. I might be able to make more income because I could do this better on my own. I know how to take care of patients. I know how to set up care plans. So there is a potential flight risk in that situation, but I do have a solution for that. So it's really not a huge drawback as long as you know how to handle it. The other drawback is technique and scripts may differ. So, and this is an important distinction. So again, I'll just use my own practice. When I have an associate doctor that's covering for me when I'm gone, and she has her own patients that she's taking care of on the normal days for her, she knows that she must take care of my patients in the technique that I've determined is appropriate for them. Even if that's not her preferred technique or style of choice, it's really important for continuity of care that she follow the adjusting steps that I've determined are best for those patients. So that's a possible drawback, but we can compensate for those drawbacks and offset those drawbacks so they're actually not as big of a drawback as they seem by setting it up in the ways that I've just shown you. So those are those examples. And actually, if you have any questions, just raise your hand. Actually, and I see a hand going up, so let me go ahead and open up the line here. And let's see, I think I can move this over here. Perfect. All right. So let's see. Dr. Kinich, welcome to the call. I just opened up your line there. Hopefully.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Welcome.
No, thank you, Scott. Timely. I was just out of town, and it was a last minute choice, so I didn't cover the office. So I'm working a short week this week, but I do find this very engaging. So I don't have a particular question.
No, I appreciate the input and sharing, of course. I mean, so you were out of town but you don't have the associate in place, so that means you had to shut the office down then, I take it.
Basically, I just decided, okay, Monday I'm going to be closed. So we basically just reshuffled everything. But yeah, that's not easy to take a whole day's worth of clients and just tell them you're coming on Tuesday instead of Monday, and you're only open half a day Tuesday, and so it is disruptive when you don't have an associate or an employee DC. So it makes all the other things you're training everybody on even more important, so that they can perform according to a standard that is acceptable, right?
Absolutely. Because then you can feel good when you leave that your patients are in good hands. And
Yeah,
there's actually another piece of it too. I mean, from the patient's point of view, which that's, why what this is all about is about taking great care of our patients. And so they have routines as well. And you have patients much like mine. And I know that my Monday patients that come in that have been coming in every Monday for years, if I was to tell them your Monday next week we're going to be closed, that would disrupt their schedule. And
for sure.
there's a chance that some of the newer patients that aren't, haven't, or any of the patients, they might actually have, that could be so disrupted to their schedule that they actually stop coming in, and then we have to go track them down.
True. I also find that people compliment me a lot when I have a substitute doctor because they appreciate in a new way what occurs in the office.
Sorry, I had to laugh there. You are absolutely right. And that's great feedback. And they appreciate you because in some cases, that associate doctor maybe didn't match your technique as perfectly. And so they're like, oh, thanks, doc. I'm glad you're back. But the other side of it too is that, they appreciate when you get to take a vacation because they know how hard we work, and the fact that you're taking a
Yeah,
vacation and you're having time with your family, then you come back fully charged and ready to go. I think that's also appreciated.
true. And I think they actually do appreciate the other doctor as well. It's kind of like um, they really like if you couldn't get the drink you wanted out of the refrigerator, it didn't exist, but you went somewhere else in your house, you found almost an equally great drink of water, you would think, oh, I'm so glad I found that. And that's kind of what I feel like patients say to me is, um, you know, I'm so glad that you had the other doctor. It worked out great for me, and I'm glad you're back. You know.
I like your analogy. Very creative.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you.
Okay.
Good question. Good point there, Dr. John.
Thanks,
Excellent.
Scott. Okay.
Mhm. All right. So let's continue on because I want to get into the job duties as I was leaving off. And for anybody on the call, if you have questions, raise your hand. I'll do my best to just jump right in and connect with you. But where we left off is that we want to make sure that we have a full schedule of responsibilities and duties for this person so that we can bring them on. And I want to just add one piece of this. When I say full schedule, I'm not meaning that it has to be 40 hours a week of stuff to do. A full schedule could be that you hire a part-time associate and they're there for half the, if it's a 40-hour week, they're there for 20 hours a week. That's okay too. You just want to make sure that for the hours that they are brought on board, that they're scheduled to be there, that they have things to do outside of just adjusting patients. And that's what I mean by a full schedule. So let's go right into this here, because this is the DC job duties. And I have just this outline. This is actually on the website, so you can check this out in more detail. But as a sample schedule, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, there's 4 hours in the morning, and then there's 5 hours in the afternoon, right? And those are patient time. So that doctor is working with patients. There's a little bit of extra cushion on either side of the patient times to give times for completing up patient files, doing new patient profiles, maybe marking x-rays, other things outside of that. But that's a great schedule as an overview for the day. On a Tuesday in my office, we're only open in the afternoon. So this is another example where you can abbreviate those hours down to fine tune exactly when that doctor is going to be there to keep them there during their most productive hours. And then we're also open on Saturdays. So their schedule includes those Saturdays. And again, you can go back and see this more on the website. I wanted to just give you this overview because this is how clearly defined it needs to be for that doctor to be productive in the office. The next is the employment agreement for the doctor of chiropractic. Now, this is on the website. I didn't mail this to you in your packet for module 1 because it's quite a few pages long. And it says sample on it because this is a legal document. This is an employment document. I've had it reviewed by our attorney in California. I can tell you that it is a legitimate document and it's up to date. So you can use that, but I highly recommend if you are going to use it, you have your employment attorney review it just to make sure. I mean, every year there's changes in employment laws, so it's nice to have that updated and know that what you have in that contract as an employment contract is legit and up to date. And then one more piece to that is that in this document, there's sections that apply for the associate doctor arrangement. And there's sections right next to those that are different. They apply to the employee-doctor relationship. Or I'm sorry, I think I said that twice. One's an associate-doctor relationship and the other is an employee-doctor relationship. When you finalize using this document, you'll want to pull out the pieces that don't apply, or you could line item them or strike them out. That's fine, but make sure that those are not left as part of the contract, the employment contract, when you hire that doctor. So there are some sections in there where you'll have to choose one or the other in terms of how you define the employment contract. So, and that's downloadable straight off the website. Okay, so here's some of the things that we want to do. I mentioned earlier to avoid a flight risk, right? We want to avoid a flight risk by building security, having security in this position so the doctor can feel good about coming to work. They can feel good about what they're doing during their day-to-day work duties and not feel like, hey, I could do better on my own. I'm being taken advantage of here. You want this to be a win-win arrangement. So some of the things that will make sure that this happens, and I have to just minimize this here. There we go. Okay. Is to train CAs to perform key patient encounters, right? By doing that, your CAs maintain the flow. That's why I used the example of my associate doctor who sent me the message after yesterday, where it was just impressive how the CAs organized the whole flow, and the doctor really just had specific things that they were responsible for. So some of those key encounters are new patients, right? When a new patient comes in, who does the intake? Who takes the history of that new patient? Who does the parts of the examination that a CA can do, right? And so that first bullet item, new patients, there's a large part of that whole appointment that can be done and completed by a CA. And how nice would it be as a doctor if you knew that you didn't have to do those parts, right? I have to just fix something here real quick on my screen. And there we go. Oh, okay, I think it's fine. So how nice is it as a doctor coming in and knowing that the new patient consultations or history taking is going to be done, the paperwork is going to be done, the basic examination stuff like range of motion and simple orthopedic tests, that's all going to be done. That's a great arrangement that will keep a doctor engaged and feeling balanced in the practice. The next one is the report of findings, right? The confrontation level that comes up in a report of findings. And I don't mean confrontation level in a negative way. It's just being able to say, this is what you need. This is what we're going to require this is what the doctor is going to require in order to accept you as a patient. And this is the financial responsibility that you're going to need. Those are confrontational circumstances. That takes that confrontational skill. Confidence level has to be high, and it has to be very detailed. For the doctor that knows how to do that and is confident in doing that and does that on a day in and day out basis, that's a potential flight risk, right? Times change, financial arrangements change, insurance profiles change. So having CAs that are fully trained in those areas and allowing the doctor, again, to focus on patient care, those are great patient encounters that we can train our team on and have them competent in delivering those areas of the patient care. And it also builds confidence in your CAs. I mean, my CAs love it when they get to go in and do a report of findings and the patient signs up for care and they lay out the whole roadmap for this patient on their first year of care. That's a huge accomplishment and a confidence builder and a great way to maintain engagement with your CAs in the practice as well, right? So these are just some key points around long-term employment. So you have associate doctors that join you and stay with you for the long term. The next one is providing malpractice insurance, right? I pay for my associates' malpractice insurance. So for them, that's a lower overhead. That's a great way to engage them in the practice. It's all covered. It's taken care of. Health insurance, malpractice insurance, relicensing seminars to get their annual CEs, the continuing education credits. That's all taken care of. So those are other ways to maintain long-term employment. So why hire a doctor of chiropractic? Well, hiring a DC can provide a platform for higher profitability and the ability to serve more patients, right? So this is a really important aspect of building this into your practice. And as Dr. Knitz just said, what a stress reliever when you have that, right? If you don't have that, as he mentioned, it can be a little stressful. But when you do, when you can leave the practice and know that your patients are in great hands, they're being cared for, they're going to be happy, they're not going to drop out of care, their appointments are being managed correctly by the CAs, everything's running as a business, that's a great place to be. That's where we want to get you to. I don't want you to be tied to a job where you can't walk away, or when it's time to retire that you can't wait to get out of there. No, chiropractic is a lifestyle. It's positive, it's encouraging, it's so rewarding, and we want to be able to continue to take care of our patients. As you can see, next week we'll get into job duties. I saved that intentionally for after the hiring a DC because job duties is going to pertain to everyone on the team. So we'll talk about that next week. And we're going to jump over to, oh, actually, and I need to do that. There we go. That wasn't allowing me to do that earlier, but I want to jump over to our website and, oh, actually, I have to share that again. So let me share my screen. There we go. Here. Okay. No, sorry, I'm bouncing around a little bit. Okay, there it is. All right. So here you can see that I have pulled up the all the documents and materials. Actually, I'll just scroll up so you can see them. So these are our materials for this section. And at the bottom, I just want to ask that you watch this video. It's called Matching Adjustment Techniques, and it really ties into that whole associate adopting my technique parameter. So take a look at that video. You just click on it, it'll open up and take you there. But that's a nice video. It's only a couple minutes, and it gives another aspect of that overview. Now let's go through here. So here's the DC hiring sequence. So if you're hiring a DC, where do you start, right? What's first? What's second? How do I even go out and find somebody? This will lay out the steps that you should follow so that you can attract qualified applicants. And that may sound familiar. If it sounds familiar, it's because we talked about that when we were attracting applicants for our CA position. But we want to attract qualified applicants for the DC position. And from there, how do we find out how qualified are they? What is their long-term plan? What's their vision? What is their experience? What do they bring to the table? This is going to help you to bring the best quality and the best candidates in for the process of interviewing and eventually hiring. So that's the first one. The next one is the DC employment agreement. As I told you, that you can download straight off the website and access that at will anytime. This one here is the DC resource list. And this is important because, as many of us have been in this position, when you have somebody who is going to end their employment with you, it usually comes without notice, or it comes on a short term, oh no, I'm in a bind, I got to find somebody fast because so-and-so just gave 2 weeks notice, right? So, or even less. I just was on the phone with one of our members who had somebody leave with less than 2 weeks notice. So it can be very frustrating when you've put a lot of time and energy into that relationship, and then suddenly they're leaving and you've got to find and develop a new relationship to protect continuity of care with your patients. So that can be frustrating. So make sure you update your DC resource list and keep it updated so that as needed, you can just pull this document out, and on a moment's notice, you can start firing away and attracting qualified applicants. On here is a sample ad as well. So there's a sample there you can use if you're going to be putting an ad on websites or at the colleges or wherever. That's a great ad right here that you can use to attract those applicants. So there's the DC resource list. And the next one is the applicant decline letter. As you have been following through with the hiring process, you're going to come across doctors who are not qualified to join your team, and that's okay. But we want to be sure that we close the loop in terms of hiring them. So in the hiring process is also a loop, right? It's a cycle. And we want to close that cycle with the applicants who are not qualified to join our team. And in closing that cycle, we want to let them know we have filled the position and you're not a candidate anymore. So that's a nice sample letter just to close that loop and keep them appraised of what's going on. For the one that does make it, the one that you do hire, here's the list of DC duties. And it's very detailed. It goes through all of the different aspects. I know not all of you are going to use all these aspects, These may not pertain to your style of practice, but I wanted to put it all in there so that you have the potential to grow to this level, or if there's something that maybe you overlooked or didn't think of, we've got it in this document and you can use that in your practice. So it has the general patient care. It has the initial examination. So what's that doctor's role for new patients? It has progress exams. It has the corrective care completion. So what happens at the new x-ray, those types of things. Miscellaneous and required scripts. So it has everything in there that you need so that this person can really follow a step-by-step process and get dialed in to your practice. I do want to point out too that down here, this has come up several times. I've had some of our members actually kind of complain that they hired a doctor, and after they hired the doctor said, well, I don't want to do that. You didn't tell me I was going to have to do that. So I highly recommend this document just because in that instance, you can come back to here and say, well, actually on your job description, it says that in addition to all the other things that I've told you, there's a section that says perform any and all additional duties, items deemed necessary by PDC and or staff. So that gives you the liberty to change and modify as your practice is growing or as your practice is changing. And with that, be able to change the job description of your associate or your employee DC. So that is an important component of a detailed job duties. You might also notice that I've included that line item in every one of the job duties, including the CAs, the PCA, and here for the associate doctor. So those are in there as well. All right. So that brings us back to the home page. And actually that wraps up our topic today. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand. I didn't see any hands up. I have actually a call with our web development team right after this, so I'm going to get ready for that. But last call for questions. Go ahead and raise your hand. I don't see any hands up. And with that, though, just to kind of close this out, it's important that you have freedom in your practice. And I think, again, not to reiterate it too much, but Dr. Knish put it very well. That freedom is what helps you to sleep good at night. You can leave and know that your patients are being cared for. You don't have the stress of thinking, oh no, what's happening while I'm gone, right? Those are all big ticket items in the realm of running a successful practice, being a successful business owner, right? A business owner is somebody who knows how important it is that a business has to run in perpetuity. Whether you're there or not, the business should be running. And that is what qualifies a business. If you ever want to read a book on this, it's called The E-Myth. It's a great book. It stands for The Entrepreneurial Myth, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. It's an older book, but it's a great book. And it talks about balancing and the aspects of a business. So check that out. But the other important side of this is for the benefit of our patients, right? The benefit of our patients in having a great business model is that they'll continue to receive chiropractic care, which is a life-saving aspect of healthcare. And doctors, we do need to have some time away from the practice, or we do want to grow in a capacity to allow us optimum service for our patients and our community. So this is what will allow you to do that. And I'll just finish with kind of a fun comment or statement maybe. What if BJ Palmer, because I'm sorry to back up, not to get off point. D.D. Palmer was known as the developer of the discoverer of chiropractic. D.D. Palmer, he was the founder of chiropractic. For those CAs on the call that aren't aware of this, D.D. Palmer was the man who discovered chiropractic and named chiropractic. None of us would be here if it wasn't for him back in 1895 when he did a very specific adjustment with his janitor in his office named Harvey Lillard. He adjusted Harvey Lillard. Harvey's hearing came back, and DD said, wow, I'm onto something. As such, he was labeled the discoverer of chiropractic in 1895. His son, BJ Palmer, who had a very savvy business sense, is named the developer of chiropractic. So we had the discoverer of chiropractic in D.D. Palmer, the developer of chiropractic in B.J. Palmer. So for both of those men, I have so much respect and appreciation for, because none of us would be here today as chiropractors if it wasn't for those two gentlemen. B.J. Palmer was the one who had the business sense. And I will dare to say again, without that business sense, none of us would be here today. But more to the point, B.J. Palmer decided to take a whole year off and leave his practice and go and travel the world. He actually wrote a book about it. It's called Round the World with BJ. And he traveled the world for a year. Now, if I would ask you, doctors, if you left your practice right now for a year, when you came back, would your practice still be thriving? Now, I didn't ask, would it be in existence? Would it actually be open? Would it be thriving? Because where BJ left off, we have the entire profession of chiropractic. So his business sense and his ability to organize these systems so that they ran on autopilot is part of why we're all here today, right? And I want you to have that in your practice. I want to have automated systems in place for you, or I want you to have automated systems in place so that your patients receive the care that they need on an ongoing basis, and it's not interrupted when you have time off or if you outgrow your current capacity. I want to make sure your patient service is uninterrupted. So hopefully that has the information you need now to make the decision to add this component to your practice if you don't already have it, or to improve this component of your practice if you're still working on it. It's been great to be with you. I don't see any hands up, so I'm not going to take any more of your time, but thanks as always for being part of DC Trainings, and I will talk to you next week.
If you would like to become a member of DC Trainings, be sure to head on over to dctrainings.com to get started today.